Hi guys, I hope you're doing really well. My name is Sarah and welcome to What the Horror, the channel where we talk about horror movies old and new. Today, we're delving deep into the heart of one of horror's most enduring and beloved subgenres, the slasher film. The ominous shadows of the 1960s to the blood-soaked streets of the 1980s and beyond, the slasher genre has captivated audiences with its relentless killers, unsuspecting victims, and unyielding terror. So join me as we trace the evolution of the slasher film, from its humble beginnings to its rise as a cultural phenomenon. Before we get going, I just want to say that the concept of the history and evolution of the slasher film is both a challenging and extremely comprehensive subject to cover. So, I have tried to keep this episode streamlined, covering and including the basics and the important, to give you a digestible study of this popular subgenre. But I am sure there will be differing facts and opinions that you may have that I haven't included. So, if you want to help expand on this subject, then feel free to add it in the comments below. Slasher films belong to a subgenre of horror distinguished by a relentless killer, often armed with bladed weapons like knives or machetes, who methodically hunt down and brutally murder numerous victims. These movies typically centre on a group of unsuspecting individuals, often teenagers or young adults who find themselves targeted by the killer. Known for their relentless focus on suspense, tension, and visceral gore, slasher films often deliver an intense and graphic viewing experience. Iconic examples like Halloween, Friday the 13th, and Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream have solidified the genre's enduring popularity. As it has evolved over time, the genre has incorporated a variety of themes and narrative subversions. The roots of the slasher genre can be traced back to the early days of cinema, with films like 13 Women from 1932, The Spiral Staircase from 1946, and House of Wax from 1953, laying the groundwork for what would later become the quintessential elements of slasher films. These early movies featured murder and mystery at their core, introducing audiences to themes of revenge, psychological terror, and gruesome violence that would become staples of the genre. 13 Women depicted sorority sisters entangled in a sinister revenge scheme, while The Spiral Staircase employed then novel jump scares as it followed a woman stalked by a gloved killer. House of Wax, a box office smash known for its pioneering use of 3D, featured a burn victim turned murderer who transformed his victims' bodies into macabre keepsakes. Origins of the slasher genre are certainly complex and multifaceted. Some of the earliest examples can be found in German Krimi films and Italian giallo films. Krimi films, short for criminal film or crime film, emerged in the late 1950s and 60s, often based on the works of British novelist Edgar Wallace. Featured elusive and powerful masked villains, stock casts reminiscent of those in modern slashers, and scenes of vicious violence. Similarly, Italian giallo films of the 60s and 70s were directly influenced by Krimi pictures, elevating the gore and sexuality to new heights while maintaining the masked killer and the murder investigation tropes. Icons like Mario Bava and Dario Argento emerged as essential figures in the giallo genre, with films like Blood and Black Lace and Deep Red pushing the boundaries of graphic violence and suspense. These European influences would have a lasting impact on the development of the slasher genre, shaping its structure, aesthetics, and thematic content for years to come. The fascination with true crime and real-life serial killers has also had a profound impact on the development and evolution of the slasher genre. True crime stories, often based on real-life cases of serial murder and violence, have captivated audiences for decades, sparking a morbid curiosity with the psychology of violent criminals and the nature of evil itself. You can see the influence cases such as Jack the Ripper have had on the genre. the Ripper's methodical approach to killing, and the mystery surrounding his identity helped establish many of the tropes and themes that would later become hallmarks of a slasher, including the idea of a shadowy and elusive killer stalking unsuspecting victims. And it's no coincidence that it was during the 70s and 80s, a period of time that was prolific with serial killers, having so many of them that they needed nicknames just to differentiate them, that we also saw a huge surge in the slasher film. Overall, the fascination with true crime and real-life serial killers has played a significant role in shaping the slasher genre, contributing to its themes, imagery, and cultural impact. By tapping into our collective fascination with the macabre and the unknown, slasher films continue to thrill and terrify audiences while also reflecting the darker aspects of the human psyche. But it's not just the world of cinema or crime that has helped inspire and evolve the genre over the years. Like most horror movies, slasher films often reflect the contemporary fears, anxieties, and social dynamics of the time. The emergence of films that would go on to help shape the slasher genre that were released in the post-World War II era coincided with a period of social and cultural upheaval, including shifts in gender roles and anxieties about suburban conformity. These shifts challenged traditional ideas of masculinity and femininity, leading to a re-evaluation of gender roles within society. Women were increasingly seen as capable of roles beyond homemaking, go women, and were stepping out into the world, while men had to adapt to new expectations of emotional expression and involvement in domestic life. In the context of the slasher genre, these shifts in gender roles were reflected in the portrayal of female protagonists who challenged traditional gender norms and expectations. Films from the 60s like Psycho and Peeping Tom explored themes of sexual repression and gender-based violence, depicting female characters who were stalked and victimized by male killers. These narratives often served as allegories for societal anxieties surrounding changing gender dynamics and the perceived threat to traditional gender roles. Films in the 70s then started exploring the anxieties around suburban conformity and societal norms. Black Christmas highlights the vulnerability of young women within the confines of their own home, echoing anxieties about safety and security in suburban environments. The Stepford Wives serves as a satirical commentary on gender relations and the pressure to conform to traditional roles within suburban communities. And Alice Sweet Alice explores themes of family dysfunction, religious hypocrisy, and the dark underbelly of suburban life, reflecting anxieties about the facade of respectability. Texas Chainsaw Massacre reflects these anxieties in a slightly different way. The Sawyer family serves as a symbol of deviance from social norms, with their shocking appearance, cannibalistic tendencies, and general disregard for conventional morality. The film can be seen as tapping into the fears of the unknown and the other, as well as challenging the notion of safety and security within one's own home. The home invasion element, combined with the rural setting, creates a sense of isolation and vulnerability for the protagonists, highlighting the fragility of the suburban ideal and potential for chaos lurking beneath the surface of seemingly peaceful communities. Now, the sexual revolution of the 1960s and 70s challenged societal norms, ushering in an era of newfound sexual freedom and empowerment, especially among young people. Against this backdrop, the slasher genre emerged as a prominent cultural phenomenon in the 1970s and 80s. Films like Halloween, Friday the 13th, and A Nightmare on Elm Street capitalized on the anxieties and uncertainties surrounding the sexual revolution and women's liberation by tapping into fears about the consequences of newfound sexual freedom and empowerment. In many slasher films of this era, sexually active teenagers are depicted as the primary targets of the killers, often meeting gruesome fates as punishment for their perceived moral transgressions. This portrayal reflects anxieties about the perceived dangers of sexual liberation and promiscuity, as well as social fears about the breakdown of traditional values and morality. Additionally, the portrayal of female protagonists in slasher films reflected tensions around changing gender roles, with some characters defying stereotypes while others reinforced them. Overall, the slasher genre of this era mirrored societal anxieties about sexuality, morality, and gender dynamics. But then, during the 1980s and 90s, the slasher genre faced heightened scrutiny and criticism from various quarters of society, including concerned parents, politicians, and moral advocacy groups. These critics contended that slasher films glorified violence and desensitized audiences, particularly young viewers, to the consequences of aggressive behaviour. This growing moral panic was fueled by fears of juvenile delinquency and the perceived influence of media on impressionable minds, leading to calls for stricter regulation and censorship of violent content in movies. As a result of this backlash, the film industry faced pressure to address these concerns and mitigate public outrage. This pressure manifested in various ways, including increased censorship measures imposed by regulatory bodies such as the MPAA and self-regulation by filmmakers and studios. Now, many filmmakers responded to this climate of scrutiny by adopting a more self-aware and satirical approach to the genre, using humour and irony to comment on the conventions and cliches of slasher films while simultaneously subverting audience expectations. We love the unexpected, baby. In Scream, Billy and Stu embody the moral panic surrounding media violence. Billy and Stu openly discuss their motivations for committing murder, revealing that they were inspired by horror movie cliches and desensitized to violence by the media. By portraying Billy and Stu as products of their media-saturated environment, Scream critiques the social tendency to scapegoat media violence as a cause for real-world aggression violence and antisocial behaviour among young people. Moreover, the moral panic surrounding the slasher genre prompted a broader cultural conversation about the effects of media violence on society and the responsibilities of the entertainment industry in portraying violent content responsibly. This dialogue ultimately influenced the evolution of the slasher genre, leading to changes in storytelling techniques, thematic elements, and the portrayal of violence on screen. While the controversy surrounding the genre persisted, it also prompted filmmakers to explore new avenues for creative expression and social commentary within the confines of the slasher genre. Now, it is almost impossible to really pinpoint the moment of origin for slasher films, but a lot of people consider the year 1960 to be a hugely significant moment for the evolution of or creation of the slasher, as we had the release of both Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho and Michael Powell's Peeping Tom. Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho is often cited as the archetype of the modern slasher film. The film's exploration of the protagonist's disturbed psyche, particularly through the character of Norman Bates, paved the way for the portrayal of complex and psychologically driven villains in slasher films. Additionally, the infamous shower scene in Psycho revolutionized the depiction of violence on screen, setting a new standard for visceral and suspenseful filmmaking that would go on to inspire countless filmmakers in the years to come. Similarly, Michael Powell's Peeping Tom made significant contributions to the development of the slasher. Peeping Tom delves into themes of voyeurism and psychological torment, exploring the twisted motivations of its protagonist, Mark Lewis. The film's examination of the relationship between violence and voyeurism laid the groundwork for the portrayal of predatory killers in slasher films. Together, Psycho and Peeping Tom established the beginnings of a blueprint for the slasher film genre, introducing audiences to the tropes of the disturbed killer, the unsuspecting victim, and the tension-filled suspense that would become hallmarks of the genre. The 60s may have played an important role in the formation of the slasher film, but it wasn't until the 1970s that we actually started to see the template of the slasher that we now all know and love today. Against the backdrop of societal upheaval and shifting norms, these movies delved into themes of fear, paranoia, and urban decay, reflecting the anxieties of a generation grappling with Vietnam, Watergate, and economic uncertainty. With masked killers lurking in the shadows and unsuspecting victims falling prey to their murderous intentions, these films captured the collective imagination and gave voice to the fears lurking beneath the surface of suburbia. Through the 70s, 3 films emerged that played a very significant role in shaping and defining the genre. 1974 saw the release of Bob Clark's Black Christmas, set within the confines of a sorority house amid the backdrop of the holiday season. The film ingeniously thrusts audiences into a chilling narrative where a cohort of young women becomes the target of a relentless killer. It also followed in the footsteps of Peeping Tom by once again putting the audience in the eyes or the shoes of the killer, creating a sense of voyeurism. But what sets Black Christmas apart is not merely its introduction of terror to the holiday season, but its adept manipulation of tension and suspense, creating an atmosphere that lingers throughout the film's runtime. The film also subverted the traditional gender roles by creating female characters resilient and resourceful in the face of danger. 1974 also saw the release of Tobe Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a film that not only shocked audiences with its raw intensity and visceral violence, but also revolutionized the slasher film. What sets the Texas Chainsaw Massacre apart is its groundbreaking approach to horror filmmaking, characterized by its gritty realism, innovative techniques, and unyielding sense of dread. Hooper's use of handheld camera work, disorienting editing, and minimalist score creates an immersive experience that blurs the line between fiction and reality, amplifying the terror and unease felt by the audience. TCM also included new elements to the genre, including a rural setting, moving away from urban landscapes, and Leatherface's weapon of choice, the chainsaw, setting the precedent of the use of unconventional and brutal implements by subsequent killers. And in 1978, we had the release of John Carpenter's Halloween, perhaps the most transformative film in the slasher genre, not only revolutionizing its conventions, but also introducing new elements that would become hallmarks of the genre. One of the most notable contributions is the introduction of the final girl trope, wherein a resilient and resourceful female protagonist emerges as the sole survivor who confronts and ultimately defeats the killer. Jamie Lee Curtis's portrayal of Laurie Strode solidified her character as an archetype of strength and survival, setting a new standard for female protagonists in horror cinema. Additionally, Halloween eschewed the overt gore and explicit violence of previous slasher films like TCM, although a lot of that is left to your imagination, but opting instead for a more restrained and psychological approach to horror. By focusing on suspense and tension rather than gratuitous bloodshed, Halloween then appealed to a much broader audience while still delivering spine-tingling thrills. Overall, Halloween not only set a new standard for horror filmmaking, but also inspired countless imitators and solidified its status as a cultural phenomenon. I mean, its influence can still be seen in countless slasher films that followed, as well as in the broader popular culture, where its iconic imagery and themes continue to resonate with audiences. The 1980s further propelled the genre into mainstream while simultaneously pushing its boundaries. With groundwork laid by Halloween, filmmakers embraced the formula of masked killers stalking unsuspecting victims with renewed enthusiasm, resulting in a wave of inventive and often outrageous entries into the genre. These films capitalized on the era's cultural zeitgeist, blending elements of teenage rebellion, suburban anxieties, and supernatural lore to create a pretty diverse tapestry of horror. Against this backdrop, several standout slasher films emerged, each leaving a mark on the genre. In 1980, we had the release of Friday the 13th, a self-admitted attempt to copy the financial success of Halloween. While Friday the 13th laid the groundwork for the franchise, it's the sequels that truly cemented its status as a genre-defining series, introducing the iconic character of Jason Voorhees, whose silent, masked presence embodies the archetype of the relentless slasher villain, of course following in suit from Michael Myers previously in Halloween. The sequels expanded upon the mythology established in the first film. Jason's evolution from a mortal antagonist to a supernatural force of nature, armed with his signature hockey mask and machete, set a new standard for horror antagonists and inspired countless imitators. With each installment, the Friday the 13th franchise pushed the boundaries of on-screen violence, delivering inventive and sometimes shocking death sequences that captivated audiences and solidified its place in horror history. Through its blend of teenage rebellion, supernatural terror, and campy charm, Friday the 13th and its sequels helped define the genre. Then, in 1984, we had the release of Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street. Now, what sets A Nightmare on Elm Street apart is its inventive blending of supernatural horror with psychological terror, creating a unique and terrifying premise that captivated audiences. One of the most significant contributions of A Nightmare on Elm Street to the slasher genre is its introduction of Freddy Krueger as a truly iconic villain. Freddy's twisted sense of humor, his grotesque appearance, and ability to stalk and kill his victims in their dreams added a whole new dimension to the genre, expanding its boundaries now beyond the realm of a physical reality. Moreover, the film's exploration of dreams and nightmares as a battleground for survival injected fresh creativity and originality into the slasher formula. In addition to its innovative approach to horror, A Nightmare on Elm Street also solidified its place in pop culture, with Freddy Krueger becoming a cultural icon. Then, in 1988, we had the release of Tom Holland's Child's Play, which brought a fresh twist to the genre with its introduction of the iconic killer, Chucky, who was in fact a possessed doll. Child's Play brought a fresh perspective to the idea of innocence corrupted. The juxtaposition of a seemingly harmless children's toy being inhabited by the soul of a serial killer created a sense of unease and added depth to the narrative. This very much reflects the cultural panic of the time in America of satanic panic and the corruption of the innocent children. This theme of innocence betrayed and the blurring of boundaries between the ordinary and the supernatural became recurring motifs in subsequent slasher films and contributed to the genre's evolution. Furthermore, Child's Play demonstrated the effectiveness of practical effects and puppetry in horror filmmaking, especially in slashers. The lifelike animatronics used to bring Chucky to life added a sense of realism and authenticity to the character, enhancing the overall impact of the film's scares. Overall, Child's Play not only introduced a memorable and enduring villain in Chucky, but also pushed the boundaries of the slasher genre by incorporating supernatural elements, exploring themes of innocence and corruption, and showcasing practical effects in slasher filmmaking. Against a backdrop of growing concerns about the influence of media violence on younger audiences, the 1990s witnessed a continuation of the evolution of the genre. Filmmakers explored new thematic and narrative avenues while remaining faithful to its roots. One notable trend was the resurgence of self-aware and meta-horror films, exemplified by Wes Craven's Scream, which cleverly deconstructed genre conventions, while also revitalizing interest in slashers. Additionally, the decade saw a shift towards more diverse representation within the genre, with films like Candyman and Urban Legend exploring themes of race and contemporary social issues. In the 90s, when the popularity of slashers was dwindling due to an outpour of sequels to franchises being released with decreasing levels of quality, one film was released that reinvigorated the slasher genre with its clever meta-commentary and self-aware humor, and that was Wes Craven's Scream, released in 1996. One of the most defining features of Scream is its self-referential. Now, I've had to break that down because I've tried to say that word 7 times. Its self-referential humour and deconstruction of horror movie tropes. The characters in the film are keenly aware of the rules and cliches of horror films, often referencing classic movies and discussing the conventions of the genre. This meta-commentary adds an extra layer of depth and complexity to the narrative, blurring the lines between reality and fiction and keeping audiences guessing until the very end. Now, while Ghostface is often considered a less iconic killer than Freddy, Jason, or Michael, believe me, people lost their minds when I put Ghostface in the top tier in my ranking of horror villains. But Scream boasts a strong ensemble cast, including Neve Campbell, Carly Cox, and David Arquette, who all deliver memorable performances that add depth and dimension to their characters. Now no longer faceless and generic characters who are simply there to run around and be killed off, as in Friday the 13th. Overall, Scream is a landmark achievement in horror filmmaking, revitalizing the slasher genre for a new generation of audiences. In the aftermath of Scream in the 1990s, brought forth a wave of formidable entries in the slasher genre. Formidable, but copycats, such as 1997's I Know What You Did Last Summer and 1998's Urban Legend. Even long-standing classics underwent transformation to align with the era's innovative approach to slashers. So for instance, Halloween ventured into meta territory with the release of Halloween H2O, or H20, in 1998. Marking a departure from its predecessor's traditional format. The 2000s also marked a period of evolution and innovation for the slasher genre. Advancements in special effects and technology allowed for increasingly elaborate kill sequences, as seen in films like Final Destination, released in 2000, which drew inspiration from the slasher tradition while offering fresh spins on the genre. These films pushed the boundaries of what was possible within the genre, incorporating elements of supernatural horror, psychological suspense, and dark humour to captivate audiences and keep them on the edge of their seats. Against a backdrop of rapid technological advancement and shifting cultural attitudes, the slasher genre continued to evolve, with filmmakers finding new ways to terrify and entertain audiences while paying homage to the genre's rich history. The 2000s witnessed a surge in slasher films that skillfully blended subgenres to deliver fresh and compelling narratives. Films like 2003's Wrong Turn and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake drew inspiration from or helped create the rising splatter subgenre epitomized by films like Saw and Hostel, to craft visceral and intense kill sequences that left audiences on the edge of their seats. In 2008, The Strangers capitalized on the home invasion subgenre, utilizing its premise to create an atmosphere of tension and dread. Additionally, American Psycho from 2000 stands out as a sophisticated social commentary disguised as a slasher film, deftly exploring themes of greed and corruption within the wealthy elite while subverting traditional slasher villain conventions. In the 2010s, the slasher genre again continued to evolve and adapt. Go figure. Filmmakers exploring new ideas and subverting traditional tropes. So for example, You're Next from 2011 follows a family reunion that turns deadly when masked intruders begin hunting the family members one by one. And this features a very strong female protagonist who switches things around on the villains and begins to fight back against the attackers. The Purge series from 2013 onwards takes place in a dystopian future where all crime, including murder, is legal for one night each year, exploring themes of violence and survival in a unique social context. Hush, directed by Mike Flanagan and released in 2016, follows a deaf and mute woman who must defend herself from a masked killer, offering a fresh perspective on the slasher formula. And in Happy Death Day, released in 2017, the film combines slasher horror with a time loop narrative, like Groundhog Day, again adding a new twist to the genre. Additionally, The Babysitter, released in 2017, blends horror and comedy, featuring over-the-top violence and humour while exploring themes of satanic cults and sacrifice. So these examples showcase the diverse range of storytelling approaches and themes seen in slasher cinema during the 2010s, highlighting the genre's ability to both evolve and adapt to changing audience tastes. The slasher genre has undergone a remarkable evolution since its inception, shaped by social, cultural, and technological changes over the decades. Beginning with its roots in psychological thrillers and crime films of the 1960s, the genre found its stride in the 1970s and 80s, with iconic films like Halloween and Friday the 13th, which introduced enduring tropes like the final girl and masked killers. The 1990s saw a resurgence with self-aware entries like Scream, while the 2000s experimented with blending subgenres and updating classic formulas for a new audience. In the 2010s and beyond, filmmakers continue to innovate, incorporating new storytelling techniques and themes while trying to stay true to the genre's core elements. And as we look to the future, the slasher genre remains a vital part of horror cinema, with endless possibilities for exploration and reinvention. Whether through nostalgic throwbacks or bold new interpretations, slasher films will continue to captivate audiences and push the boundaries of fear for years to come. Thank you for checking out today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I have to say, I am really enjoying doing this evolution of series. It was so interesting discovering the evolution of found footage, but more so of the slasher as well. And as I say, this episode could have been 3 times the length, but I have tried to keep it streamline. If you're new here and you found me through this episode, then don't forget to subscribe, as I will also be releasing a companion list of the ultimate slasher watch list, and I am sure this one is going to create some discussion in the comments. I will also be continuing with this series, covering the evolution of other subgenres of horror in the future, but also the evolution of particular characters. I am still currently wading through my research of the evolution of Dracula. If there are any subgenres you guys would really like me to cover, do let me know in the comments. I'll try and cover them all. If there are some you would like to see sooner rather than later, then let me know in the comments. And if you would like to join these wonderful names here, my wonderful Patreon members, and have access to extra content once a week, or to just support the channel, then I will leave a link to my Patreon page in the description box below. But in the meantime, thank you as always for stopping by. I really, really do appreciate it. Take care of yourselves, and I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye. One of the most defining features of Scream is its self-referential. I sound like Muttley. One of the most defining features of Scream is its referential. Jesus Christ. Features of Scream is its